He fought for his country, but when he came home, the battle had just begun. James Carter, a 42-year-old black Army veteran, had survived 2 tours overseas. He'd seen danger, loss, and fear, but nothing prepared him for what he was about to face at home. All he wanted was peace, a quiet life, and a roof over his head. But sometimes, peace doesn't come easy. James moved into a small apartment on the east side of town. The place wasn't much, but it was clean and quiet. The landlord, Harold Benton, a 63-year-old white man, seemed polite at first. Rent was always on time, no trouble, no noise. Everything was fine, until Harold discovered that James was a veteran and that he was black. One cold morning, James came home from work and found a notice taped to his door. It read, "Vacate the property in 30 days. Failure to do so will result in legal action." James froze. He had never missed a single payment. Confused, he called Harold immediately. The old man answered with a laugh. "No mistake," he said. "You people always think you're owed something. Maybe try the projects." James didn't say a word. He just hung up the phone and stared at the wall in silence. Those words hit harder than any bullet he'd ever faced. He fought for freedom, for justice. But here, in his own home, he was being attacked because of his skin? James reported the incident to the local housing authority. He hoped someone would listen. But before they could even respond, things got worse. One by one, the utilities stopped working. The heat went off in the middle of winter, then the water, then the lights. Harold claimed James had damaged the property and filed a full eviction order.
But James wasn't giving up. He gathered proof, receipts, photos, text messages, and bank statements. Every payment was made. Every lie was documented. He wasn't going to let hate win this time. The court date came faster than expected. Harold walked into the courtroom dressed in his best suit, smirking like a man who believed the system would protect him. James walked in quietly, wearing his old military jacket, the same one he'd worn overseas. Harold stood first. "Your Honor," he said confidently, "this man hasn't paid rent in months. He's lying. Look at him, a typical freeloader." The judge nodded and turned to James. James didn't argue. He just opened his folder and handed over his evidence, receipts, screenshots, payment records, and something more. The courtroom went silent. The judge's eyebrows lifted as she flipped through the papers. "Mr. Benton," she said, "these payments are all verified. Do you deny sending these text messages?" Harold stammered, I was just frustrated, Your Honor." The judge's tone changed. Frustration doesn't excuse hatred. Then James took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "there's something else." He pressed play. Harold's voice filled the courtroom. "I don't want your kind here. You people bring down property value." The silence that followed was heavy. The judge leaned forward, her face turning cold. "Mr. Benton," she said, "you've shown clear racial discrimination and harassment. This eviction is dismissed, and I'm ordering a full investigation into your conduct." Harold's smirk disappeared. The same man who mocked James was now shaking in his seat. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack. Case dismissed. Reporters were waiting outside when James walked out of the courthouse. Cameras flashing, microphones in his face. One asked, "How does it feel to win?" James looked down, then said softly, "I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for respect." The story spread everywhere. Black veteran wins case against racist landlord. People cheered. Others finally spoke up about similar stories. Harold faced fines, backlash, and an investigation that could ruin him completely. But just when James thought it was over, something happened. Late one night, as rain hit the windows, James heard a soft sound by his door. A piece of paper slid underneath. He walked over, unfolded it slowly. The note said, "You think you won, soldier? This isn't over." He looked out into the hallway, but no one was there. Just silence. He folded the note and sat down, staring into the darkness. He thought the war ended years ago, but maybe the real battle was just beginning. The note slid under the door was more than just paper. It was a warning, a threat. James sat there staring at it for hours. The words burned into his mind. "You think you won, soldier? This isn't over." He thought justice had been served. He thought the nightmare was done. But sometimes hate doesn't fade. It hides and waits. The next morning, James went outside. His car tires were slashed. The word "loser" was scratched across the driver's door. The neighbors looked away. No one said a word. He called the police. They came, took notes, and left. No follow-up, no concern. Just another report in a stack of forgotten files. James wasn't surprised. He had seen this kind of silence before, overseas and at home. But this time, he wasn't backing down. He installed cameras. He documented everything. He knew Harold was behind it, but he needed proof. A week later, his phone buzzed at 2:37 a.m. Motion detected. James sat up, heart racing. He opened the camera feed and froze. A shadow stood near his door. Tall, heavy build, and holding something. The figure looked straight into the camera, then covered it with tape. James moved fast, grabbing his old service pistol from the drawer. He stepped quietly toward the door. Every creak of the floor echoed like thunder. When he opened it, the hallway was empty. The smell of cigarette smoke lingered in the air. On the floor was another note. This one said, "You can't hide behind your medals forever." The next morning, James went straight to the police station with the footage, but the officer just shrugged. "It's blurry. No face, no prints, no case," he said. James clenched his fist but said nothing. The officer smirked. "You veterans always think the world owes you." James walked out before his anger got the best of him. He knew he was alone, but not helpless. He started digging. He learned Harold had been reported before. 3 tenants in the last 5 years, all black, all mysteriously evicted or harassed. 2 moved away. 1 disappeared. James gathered the files and went back to the courthouse. The same judge, Judge Daniels, listened carefully this time. "Mr. Carter," she said, "what you're describing sounds like criminal intimidation. Leave it with me."
Days turned into weeks. James went to work, came home, and tried to live normal. But strange things kept happening. His mailbox was ripped open. His windows cracked. One night, someone poured oil on his doorstep. The message was clear: leave or worse. Then, one afternoon, a woman knocked on his door. She was shaking, clutching a small bag. "Are you Mr. Carter?" she asked. "I used to live here, apartment 2C?" James nodded. She whispered, "He did it to me, too. Harold, I had to move out. He said he'd make my life hell." Tears filled her eyes. "I still see him outside my new place." James comforted her, took her statement, and called the judge's office again. This time, he wasn't leaving it to chance. He called the local reporter he knew from his court case. "You still covering injustice stories?" he asked, "because I've got one for you." Within days, the headline spread. "Black veteran faces harassment after winning landmark housing case." Cameras returned. This time, the light was brighter. And Harold hated it. The pressure grew. Harold's business partner quit. Tenants left. His name was all over the news. The judge ordered him to appear in court again for violating tenant rights. He showed up, furious, red-faced, and trembling. He pointed at James across the courtroom and shouted, "You ruined my life!" The judge slammed her gavel. "Enough, Mr. Benton," she said firmly. "You ruined your own life." The court ordered Harold to pay damages and face possible jail time for harassment and discrimination. James finally exhaled. It felt like it was over. Justice. Again. But something didn't feel right. That night, as James locked his door, his phone rang. No caller ID. He hesitated, then answered. A deep voice on the other end whispered, "You shouldn't have embarrassed him." Silence. Then a click. James tried calling back. No answer. He checked his cameras again. One was offline. Then another. One by one, the feeds went dark. He stood there in the dim light, staring at the black screens. Then a small red light blinked in the corner of the living room, not from his system, from a hidden camera he didn't install. His heart stopped. Someone had been watching him, and when he turned toward the window, he saw a figure standing across the street, motionless, watching. The blinking red light glowed in the dark like a warning. James froze. His pulse quickened. He moved closer and saw it. A tiny camera wedged behind the bookshelf, its lens aimed straight at his couch. He stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "How long has this been here?" He grabbed his phone and called the police, but before they arrived, he found another one, hidden behind the kitchen vent, and another, inside the smoke detector in his bedroom. Each one wired, each one active. He wasn't just being watched, he was being hunted. When the officers finally arrived, they looked uneasy. "We'll take the devices in for analysis," one said, avoiding eye contact. "Could be from a previous tenant." James stared at him. "A previous tenant? You think someone hid 3 live cameras and forgot?" The officer shrugged. "We'll see what we find." James didn't sleep that night. Every creak made him tense. Every shadow looked alive. He sat by the window, clutching his service pistol, eyes fixed on the streetlight outside. That's when he saw it. The same car, the same black sedan parked across the street, engine off, lights dim, just sitting there. He watched it for hours. No one got in, no one got out. But he could feel it. Whoever was in that car was watching him too. The next morning, James took matters into his own hands. He went to a tech expert, an old army buddy named Marcus, who specialized in surveillance. Marcus connected the cameras to a reader. Within seconds, he frowned. Man, these weren't just recording, they were streaming live. James's heart dropped. Streaming? To where? Marcus typed quickly, tracing the connection. Encrypted IP, but I can see the base signal. It's local, somebody within 2 miles. James clenched his jaw. Harold. They drove back to the apartment complex together. Marcus brought a tracker device. As they got closer to the landlord's office, the signal got stronger. Marcus looked up. "It's here, right in this building." James took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The office was empty, dusty blinds, paper stacked on the desk. He walked toward the back door and stopped. A faint buzzing sound came from a small metal box under the desk. Marcus crouched down and opened it. A signal receiver, still warm.
But something didn't add up. Marcus scanned again. The signal wasn't just coming from the receiver. It was bouncing to another source. They followed it down the hall to the maintenance room. Inside, a storage cabinet was locked. James broke it open, and what he saw stopped him cold. Dozens of hard drives, each labeled with apartment numbers, each marked with dates, months, even years of footage. Marcus whispered, "Man, he's been spying on everyone." James picked up one labeled 2B, his old unit. He inserted it into Marcus's laptop. The screen flickered. Then, grainy footage appeared. James, sleeping, eating, talking on the phone. completely unaware. Then another angle, a close-up of his living room, and suddenly another face appeared on screen. Not Harold. Someone else. It was a man in his 40s, wearing maintenance overalls, the same man James had seen fixing pipes weeks ago. The same man who'd smiled and said, "Welcome, soldier. We take care of our own here." James stepped back. It wasn't Harold. It was him. Marcus zoomed in. Name tag says, Paul Jensen, head of building maintenance. James whispered, "He's the one watching me." They took the evidence straight to the police. This time the response was different. A warrant was issued. They raided Paul's storage unit later that evening, and what they found went far beyond James's apartment. Hundreds of recordings, women, families, kids, all tenants, all spied on. The entire building wired like a trap. But one folder on his laptop stood out. It was labeled JC Priority. Inside were dozens of photos of James, taken outside, inside, even from across the street. The black sedan, the notes, the calls, all traced back to Paul. But then came the real shock. One document, a contract, between Paul and Harold Benton. Harold had hired Paul to monitor James, to gather evidence, to make him leave. James stood in silence as the officers read the file. Harold wasn't just a bitter landlord, he had hired someone to terrorize him. And now both of them faced serious charges. The next day in court, Harold looked pale, defeated. But Paul? He didn't say a word. He just stared at James and smiled, a slow, eerie smile that didn't belong to a man afraid of prison. When the hearing ended, Paul leaned toward James and whispered, just loud enough, "You think this ends with me." That night, James went home to pack his things. He was finally moving to a safer place. The police had cleared his apartment. The hidden cameras were gone. But as he placed his duffel bag by the door, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. A single photo. It showed James standing in his living room, taken that same night. And at the bottom of the message were just 3 words. You were right.
He stood in the courtroom, shoulders square, metal shining faintly under the lights. The whispers around him grew louder. "That's the guy who got evicted. I heard he caused trouble. No, I heard the landlord just didn't like his kind." Every voice stung, but he stayed silent, calm, controlled. The judge entered and everyone stood. When they sat, all eyes shifted to the landlord, Mr. Hargrove, smug, confident, tapping his pen against the table. He looked like a man who thought he'd already won. The lawyer representing the veteran, a young black woman named Maya, rose to speak. Her voice was clear and strong. "Your Honor, this is not just an eviction case. This is a case about dignity, respect, and the truth behind why my client was forced out of his home." The judge leaned forward. "Proceed." Maya showed photos, damage reports that didn't exist before the veteran moved in, false complaints, and even text messages from the landlord's assistant saying, "He doesn't fit the image of our building." The courtroom gasped. Hargrove's confident smile faded for the first time. The veteran just sat there, quiet, his hands folded. Every scar on his skin told a story the world had ignored. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke for him. Then Hargrove's lawyer tried to fight back. "My client had every legal right," but the judge cut him off. A right doesn't justify discrimination. You could feel the tension. The landlord's eyes flicked around the room, desperate. The veteran's calmness only made it worse. Then the judge leaned back in his chair and said, Before I make my final decision, I have one question. The room went still. Everyone waited. The veteran looked up, steady, ready for anything. Why, the judge said slowly, why did you rent to this man in the first place if you never intended to treat him fairly? Hargrove froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He glanced at his lawyer. Then the bailiff stepped closer. The silence stretched. It was uncomfortable, heavy. Then, in a low voice, Hargrove muttered, because I thought he'd leave sooner or later.
The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled. Cameras flashed. The judge's gavel slammed down. Order! Maya looked at the veteran. We got him, she whispered. But the veteran didn't smile. His eyes were locked on the landlord, who looked like he'd just realized something bigger than losing the case. The judge stared down at him. You do understand what this means, Mr. Hargrove? Hargrove swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. The judge nodded slowly. Good, because this court is not done with you yet. The veteran tilted his head slightly. Not done, he muttered under his breath. The judge turned toward him. Mr. Brooks, you've shown remarkable patience through this entire ordeal, but I need you to know, there's something about this case that hasn't been revealed yet. The courtroom buzzed again. Maya frowned. Your Honor, what do you mean? The judge sighed. Something in the landlord's financial records doesn't add up, and I have reason to believe this eviction wasn't just about race. Everyone froze. The landlord's face went pale. The veteran's heartbeat quickened. If not race, then what? Maya asked. The judge looked down at his papers, then back up at them. That's what we're about to find out. Court adjourned until tomorrow morning. The gavel hit. The sound echoed like thunder. As the crowd began to leave, the veteran turned to Maya. What do you think he meant? She shook her head. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's bigger than we thought. Outside, the news cameras swarmed them. The landlord tried to push through the crowd, but one reporter shouted, Mr. Hargrove, is it true you were paid to evict him? The landlord froze mid-step, his face drained of color. Maya turned sharply toward him. Paid? By who? No answer. He rushed into his car, slamming the door shut, but before he drove off, the veteran caught a glimpse through the window. A man in the passenger seat. Someone he recognized from years ago. The car sped off. Maya looked at him. Who was that? He hesitated, his voice low. Someone I never thought I'd see again. The camera pans to the veteran's face, determined, haunted. A single thought runs through his mind. This wasn't just discrimination. It was something deeper, something planned, something dangerous. Fade, when you fight for fairness, you never know what truth might rise to the surface. But for Mr. Brooks, this fight has only just begun.
The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Every seat filled, cameras flashing, reporters whispering. Everyone wanted to know, what was the truth behind the landlord's secret? The veteran sat quietly, eyes fixed on the floor. His lawyer, Maya, leaned in and whispered, You ready for whatever comes? He nodded slowly. I've been ready my whole life. The judge entered, his face unreadable. The air felt heavier this time. Court is now in session. He adjusted his glasses and looked at both sides. Yesterday, I mentioned inconsistencies in Mr. Hargrove's financial records. Overnight, we found where those inconsistencies lead. The crowd leaned forward. The landlord shifted in his seat, his lawyer whispering frantically beside him. The judge continued. We discovered that the eviction notice and several others like it were funded by an outside source, a private company called Fairline Holdings. Maya frowned. Fairline? She whispered. The veteran's eyes widened. That name, it sounded familiar. The judge went on. This company has been quietly buying up properties across the city and targeting tenants they see as undesirable. Gasps filled the room. Then Maya asked, Your Honor, who owns Fairline Holdings? The judge looked down at his file, then back up at the courtroom. Mr. Hargrove, would you like to answer that?
The landlord's face went pale. His lips trembled. I can't. The judge's tone hardened. Then I will. He looked directly at the veteran. The owner is a man named Charles Whitman. The veteran froze. His breath caught in his throat. Maya turned to him. Who is that? He swallowed hard. My former commanding officer. The room erupted in shock. Cameras flashed, reporters shouting questions. The landlord buried his face in his hands. The judge slammed his gavel. Order! The veteran stood slowly. His voice was low, shaking. That man was supposed to have my back. He ordered us into missions that nearly killed us. And when I exposed him for stealing supplies meant for the troops, he was forced out of the military. The judge nodded gravely. And it seems, Mr. Brooks, he never forgot your name. Maya clenched her fists. So this was revenge. The judge's voice grew heavier. Yes, a quiet, calculated revenge, using property laws and discrimination to break the man who once stood for integrity. The courtroom went silent. Everyone looked at the veteran, who stood tall, proud, but broken inside. He looked at the landlord. You let yourself be used by a coward. Hargrove looked up, tears in his eyes. He said it was just business. He said no one would ever find out. The judge sighed. Well, now everyone knows. Maya stepped forward. Your Honor, we ask not just for dismissal of this case, but for full restitution, damages for racial discrimination, emotional distress, and malicious targeting. The judge nodded slowly. You'll have it.
But before the gavel struck, the veteran spoke again. Your Honor, I don't want his money. Everyone turned to him. I just want one thing. The judge raised an eyebrow. And what's that? The veteran's eyes burned with quiet fire. I want that man, Charles Whitman, to face the same truth I faced. The judge paused, then nodded. He will. The gavel came down. Case closed. The courtroom erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed forward. Maya smiled through tears. You did it, she whispered. But the veteran just stared ahead, silent. The kind of silence that says it's not over yet. Later that night, he walked out of the courthouse, his medals glinting faintly under the streetlight. Rain started to fall. He looked up at the sky, whispering, I thought justice would feel lighter. Maya caught up to him. You okay? He smiled faintly. Yeah, just realizing. Fairness comes slow, but it comes. She nodded. And now he'll pay. But before she could say more, a black SUV rolled by slowly, its windows tinted, engine low. The veteran froze. Maya noticed. What's wrong? He didn't answer. The SUV stopped at the corner. Then the back window slid down just enough for him to see a familiar pair of eyes staring back at him, cold, calculating. It was Charles Whitman. The SUV pulled away. The veteran clenched his fists. He's not done. Maya frowned. You mean? He cut her off, eyes fixed on the disappearing car. He's just getting started. The rain fell harder now. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The camera zooms in on his face, calm but burning with purpose. Sometimes justice isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of the next fight. In life, justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It shows up quietly, through courage, truth, and the strength to stand tall when the world pushes you down. This story wasn't just about a veteran and a landlord. It was about how hate can be passed like a torch, but so can hope. Mr. Brooks didn't fight for money. He fought for dignity, for fairness, for a truth that too many people are still waiting to hear, that no one deserves to be treated differently because of the color of their skin or the weight of their scars. But when you expose the truth, you make enemies. And sometimes those enemies don't fade away quietly. Charles Whitman is still out there, watching, waiting. And for the first time, the hunter might be the one being hunted. This fight isn't over, because justice doesn't sleep. It doesn't forget, and it never backs down. If you believe every person deserves respect, no matter their color, their past, or their pain, then stand with us, because the next chapter of this story will change everything. This is Silent Evidence X, where every story carries a truth worth hearing. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more story like this coming up every week. Thank you for watching.